The reading, the reading at church this morning, the first
So this
reading.
is our last session until the summer break. Just a couple of orders of business. Always check the TBZ calendar page website for Sunday for this program because we'll be posting the dates on the TBZ website. In July and August, we'll do two in-person gatherings. One will be at Griggs Park in Brookline, and one will be up in Portsmouth, either at the park or at Strawberry Bank, yet to be determined. Uh, what the website will say is that there is the in-person gathering during the summer. Email Rav Tiferet to RSVP and for more information. So it won't be just out there in the general public, but people can then let us know that because I haven't picked that yet. And then we'll start up again in the fall. And what will be different next year is from October to April will be a 6.5 month series on the Torah roots of Passover. And it's going to take us 6 months of Torah study just to get to Passover. So we'll be looking at the parallel stories of the bush, the parallel stories of the magic rod or staff. We'll be looking at the parallel stories of blood, of frogs, of lice, the plagues that become part of the Haggadah. And then we'll be looking at the Torah roots of other aspects of the Haggadah. Questions like, where did the four questions come from? Where did the four sons come from? Those are all in the Torah someplace, but we'll be looking at that series. Preparing for Passover will take us 6 months to prepare for Passover, which is nothing in the drop of the hat when you consider that according to the rabbinic understanding of the Torah, it took Israel 400 years to prepare for the Exodus. So we're just going to take 6 months to get to the Exodus.
Does that mean we'll go back over some of what we've already
We'll
read?
review some of the material, but we'll look at it literally side by side, as opposed to the way we've done it, where we looked at it in order. And we'll be seeing Torah roots to the Haggadah. What did the Torah say to do with Passover? And what did the rabbis end up saying what to do with Passover? And where did the rabbis get it from the Torah? So that'll be our fall series starting in October. But for now, let's do a little bit of our lousy study.
Oh,
Lousy study?
lice?
Lice
Lice?
study.
Lousy lice.
According to the actual meaning of the word. So we had blood, and just by way of recap, we had the blood that was in one story, the red story, where Moses confronts Pharaoh at the Nile River. Moses takes his staff, strikes the Nile River, and the Nile River turns to blood. On the other hand, we had the blue story where Moses tells Aaron to take his staff and strike the land with it, and all the water that was in the land turned to blood. And we're told specifically it was the rivers, the lakes, the streams, even the rocks and the wood seeped out blood rather than water. Next thing we knew was frogs. And again, the same kind of thing. Where did the frogs come from? In one, it was Aaron making the frogs. In the other one, it was Moses making the frogs. And now we have the continuation of that story here with verse 7. And the frogs, remember, were all over the place. They came out of the Nile and they were all over the place. Saru hatzfardiim mimcha, mibatecha, me'avadecha, me'amecha, rak bayor tisharna. And this has been, the frogs came out, and Aaron, the magic man, did it, and Pharaoh's courtiers, also Pharaoh's magicians, also did it, but nobody could make it stop. And Pharaoh said, okay, you convinced me. You can all go serve your God. And that was where we left off. And so Moses said, okay, in that case, V'saru hatzvardeim, and will return, will depart the frogs, mimcha, from you, mibatecha, and from your houses, ume'avadecha, and from your servants, ume'amecha, and from your people, rak bayaor, only in the Nile, tisharna, will they remain. So the frogs, according to this, will depart from the land, but depart from every place, Moses promises, and they will then return to the Nile River. And then Moses leaves. Verse 8.
Will you say that?
Vayetze Moshe va'Aharon me'im paro, vayitzak Moshe el Adonai al devar hatzfardeim asher sam lefaro. So Vayetze, and he went out, singular, Moshe va'Aharon, and Aaron. And again, we have this, Aaron is there in the red story, but Aaron's not there in the verbs. He's the sort of the tag along, the shadow, the underling. So, and went out Moses and Aaron. A translation saying, and Moses and Aaron departed or went out, would not actually capture the Hebrew. Me'im paro, from with Pharaoh. So they were with Pharaoh, and now they are no longer. They from with Pharaoh. Vayitzak Moshe el Adonai. So Moses cries out to God. Al devar hatzvarim, on the thing of the frogs, on this frogs thing. Asher sam lefaro, that he put to Pharaoh. And once again, without a clear antecedent, we don't know if Moses is crying out to God about the frogs that he, Moses, put on Pharaoh, or Moses is crying out to God about the frogs that God put on Pharaoh. So we don't have a clear statement of who was doing the psalm, who was doing the putting. In any case, whoever started it, Vaya'as Adonai kidvar Moshe, God does as Moses speaks, according to the word of Moses. However, remember what Moses told Pharaoh was the frogs would depart from every place and return to the Nile River and be only again in the river, in the Nile. However, when God's hand takes over, Vayas Adonai kidvar Moshe, and when God takes over on the frogs, Vayamutu hatzvardeim, and the frogs died. So they didn't depart, or one could say their souls departed. So the frogs died. Min habatim, from the houses. Min hachatzerot, and from the walls. Umin hasadot, and from the fields. So they didn't depart from those places, they died in those places. So now we've got dead frogs everywhere. 10. Vayitzberu otam, chomarim chomarim, vatif ash haaretz. Vayitzberu, and they gathered up, piled up. And the word, by the way, in Yitzberut, sabar, is the same root that we get sibor, a community. The person who leads the congregations traditionally is the shaliach sibor, the representative of the community, of the gathering. So they gathered up all of these frogs, vayitzberu otam, they gathered them up, chomarim, chomarim, chomer and chomer, just pile and pile. Literally in Hebrew it says, they gathered them up, piles, piles. So they piled them up in big piles, these dead frogs. No surprising, therefore, vayitvash haaretz, vayitvash haaretz, and the land was stinky. It stunk up the land, stinked up the land. Take your pick of the past participle.
Mm.
So they piled the frogs up, and it was a stinking mess. The previous one, it was a bloody mess. Now it's a stinking mess. Vayar paro ki hayta harchava v'hachved et libo v'lo shama elo alehem ka'asher diber Adonai. So Pharaoh now clearly is removed from all these piles of stinking frogs. He's got the windows closed, the air conditioner in the palace cranked up. He doesn't feel the stink. And it's all over, it's all done. And now the key word, the middle of that line, the last red line, the hachbed et libo. Kabed, remember, is honor or heavy or reverence. Not quite sure what to do with this. And the hachbed is the causative form of the verb. And so he caused his heart to be heavy or hard, is usually the translation. But we again don't know whether he did this to himself or God did this to him. The story we want to tell is God hardens his heart again.
Could you show us where you are?
Yes, we are here in the last red line, the middle word, the hachbed et libo. So Pharaoh now is removed from all of this, frogs all over the place. It's all over. The plague is done. And his first response when it happened was, you can go worship your God. His first response now, when it's all over, is his heart gets heavy, honored, respected. Somehow, something causes his heart to change attitude. It is clearly not clear in the text that this is God doing this to Pharaoh.
Could you
It
go
simply
over that
says,
whole line
Yeah,
from
read start
11?
at the first word.
Yeah, because I
so
think you skipped that.
Vayar Paro ki hayta harchava. So Pharaoh now sees that it's all over.
What's the
There, harchava is a respite, an end. It's all over. The plague is done. He's got a break from the plague. For it was an overness, a respite, a doneness.
Har and what's harava?
Harvacha is the respite. He sees the harvacha, the respite, the break, the end, the doneness. The plague is over. The plague is over. Time to call it a day. And once it's over, the hachbed et libo. So something happens to change his mind. Something causes his mind, his heart, to now change. And the change is heaviness, honor, respect, reverence, or as usually translated, hardened. But the hachbed et libo clearly is a change of heart. Would really be a good English idiomatic translation of a Hebrew idiomatic phrase.
But caused his heart
No, hachbed caused his heart to do something, to be
do.
kabed, to be heavy, honored, respected, revered, hardened, changed. What it doesn't say is who's causing his heart to do this. There's no Adonai here. There's no statement that Adonai hachbeid et libo. And verse 11 is clearly Pharaoh-oriented, not God-oriented. We haven't had God-oriented since verse 9, when God ended the plague. And God ended it at the request of Moses. So now it is not, I believe, valid to say that this is God hardening Pharaoh's heart. The context really is much more Pharaoh is, when it's happening, doesn't like it. When it's over, forgets about it. Pharaoh is one of those leaders that happens at periods in history when responds only to the moment, has no sense of past, no sense of history, no sense of consequence.
Well,
Whatever enters Pharaoh's mind, that's what he's on right now. In case we ever see leaders like that, we can liken them to this Pharaoh.
yeah.
But how is Adonai the last word in that sentence?
There's no Adonai in this in the verse 11. Oh, there is,
There
but
is,
notice
yeah.
it's in black.
Yeah.
So it may have been an editorial comment added by the editor redactor later.
So it's clear that God made his heart harden, not Moshe.
Only if you take the editor's or the redactor's view,
Yeah.
not in the original story.
But
And
how
it
do you
doesn't say
know? How
Moses
do you know it's the redactors? You made it. You're the one who made it black here. So how did you know it was the redactors and not the original story?
Well, okay, so even if it's the original story, and as
Yeah.
I said, we don't know, we can still read it this way. And his heart was hardened,
And he
v'lo
didn't.
shama alehem, and he did not listen to them, ka'asher diber Adonai, as God had predicted. Again, it doesn't say God did it. It says God predicted that it would happen.
Is that predicted or spoke, Debar?
Well, that's as God spoke,
Yeah.
as God said. God said, Pharaoh will harden his heart. And in fact, Pharaoh hardened his heart. So there's no sense here, even if the Kasher Diber Adonai is God, it doesn't say Kasher Asa Adonai, as God did, but his heart hardened as God had said. So again, there's no indication in the last three words that God is involved in the causative verb previous. Because if God did it, then it would have said, as God had done. Or in the earlier text, it would have said, God had said up front, I will harden Pharaoh's heart every time. And we don't get that in the earlier text.
But we did get in the earlier text that God would harden his heart. That did harden his heart.
It doesn't say actually that. God said Pharaoh's heart will harden. Again, even back then, it wasn't a clear God's doing it, but God saying to Moses, this is what will happen. So we don't have a clear statement, which means we have to midrash it and decide, is this God intervening very early, in which case Pharaoh is not at fault, or is this Pharaoh being the bad guy on his own, as God said Pharaoh would, in which case we can get Pharaoh to be the bad guy. So would you like to pardon Pharaoh, or would you like to implicate Pharaoh?
Is that
So
a question?
we have the stage set. We've got a bunch of piles of stinky frogs all over the land decomposing.
What a dilemma.
So we can guess what's going to happen to all those piles of decomposing frogs on the land.
Do they dig a hole and just throw them in?
Well, it doesn't. It said they piled them up. It doesn't say they dug a hole.
What do you think they might have?
Well, I would have,
Yeah.
but I think they were digging holes still looking for fresh water. So if you're digging holes looking for fresh water, you're not going to throw a bunch of dead, stinky frogs into it.
So true, so true.
So yeah, it doesn't say Vayitzberu, they Yikravu rather, they Yikberu, they buried the frogs. It said Vayitzberu, and they gathered the frogs.
True.
Where's
So we're ready for, but won't get it till the fall. What happens to those stinky frogs? And they're going to become carriers of some kinds of vermin and bad stuff. Meanwhile, back at the blue, Moses has gone to Pharaoh. Moses has told Aaron to strike the land, and it was blood. And Moses has told Aaron to do the frogs. And now, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe Emor el Aharon, Nete et matcha, Vahach et afar haaretz, Vahaya lichinim, Bechol eretz Mitzrayim. So in the blue story, there was blood. The magicians tried to do it. They did it. Pharaoh wasn't convinced. There was frogs. The magician tried to do it. Pharaoh wasn't convinced. That was the end of the blue story. Pharaoh wasn't convinced. So we don't know what happens to the frogs in the blue story. We don't know what happens to the blood in the blue story. There was blood, but remember, the blood in the blue story was only in the Nile. The frogs in the blue story came out of the Nile. Were all over the place. Just showed up. Now Pharaoh's still not convinced because remember, Moses is standing there with Aaron confronting Pharaoh, saying, "What's this magic trick?" And Pharaoh says, "Frogs, wow, cute trick. I was expecting rabbits. You pulled a frog out of your hat." And the magician said, "Watch us." And they pulled frogs out of their hats. And Pharaoh's not convinced. So now God says to Moses, "All right, next magic trick. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe." And so now God says to Moses, "Emor el Aharon." You say to Aaron, "Nete et matcha." Stretch forth your staff. Vahach et afar haaretz. And strike the dust of the land. This is, by the way, not frog piles. Frogs are still hopping along cheerfully, ribbiting all over the place.
Mateka is what?
So, nete et matcha, stretch out your staff. So Aaron's still holding that staff that turned into a snake and now is back to a staff that turned the blood, that turned the frogs. And now he takes that same staff and hit, strike. This is, again, imperative. Makeh is a striking. So hit at afar haaretz and strike the dust of the land. So again, striking the ground. V'haya lechinim, and it will be for lice. So Aaron is turning dust into lice. This is not piles of stinky, decomposing frogs. The frogs are done. Aaron did it at the behest of Moses. The magicians do it at the behest of Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, big deal. I can do those tricks too. So now in the blue story, God says to Moses to tell Pharaoh that Aaron, and basically Moses says to Pharaoh, all right, watch this one. Okay, Aaron, do your next trick. And Aaron takes his staff, and he strikes the dust of the earth. And the dust becomes kinim, lice. Bechol Eretz Mitzrayim, in all the land of Egypt. So this isn't just a little patch of dust. Aaron hits the ground, and all over Egypt, all the sand, all the dust, all the ground suddenly starts sprouting lice. Vaya'asuchen, vayet Aharon et yado, v'matehu, vayach et afar haaretz, v'atihi hachinam, ba'adam uva'behema, kol afar haaretz, hayachinim, b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. Verse 13, Vaya'asu chen, and so they did that. The they is Moses and Aaron. What they did was Moses turns to Aaron and said to Aaron, next trick. And Aaron said, okay, here comes the next trick. And the next trick. Vayet Aharon et yado b'matehu. So Aaron stretches out his hand with his staff. Vayach et afar haaretz, and he strikes the dust of the ground, of the earth. V'atihi hachinam ba'adam uva'behema, and here hachinam would be from the root kinim, lice. So really a good translation is V'atihi hachinam ba'adam uva'behema, and it was that people and cattle were lousy. They were licey. That's the kinam. They were liced. It liced them.
Got as far as Aaron, not Yado.
So Aaron stretches out his hand, Vayet Aharon et yado. So Aaron stretched out his hand, V'matehu, with his staff, Vayach et afar, and he struck the dirt dust, haaretz, of the land. Vatahi, and it was hachinam ba'adam uva'behema, and it was lousy in men and in beasts, in people, and it was lice-filled. They were liced. That is, people and cattle were covered in lice. Kol afar haaretz, all the dust of the earth. So not just a little local patch, but all the dust of the earth was now chinim, lice, bechol eretz Mitzrayim, in all of the land of Egypt. People are minding their own business, digging up holes, looking for water, dealing with frogs all over the place, and suddenly the land becomes lice-filled.
But Moses and Aaron didn't get any lice.
Nope. And we don't know about what's happening in Goshen at this point, because it's Bechal Eretz Mitzrayim, in all the land of Egypt. And does that include Goshen or not include Goshen?
I hope not.
No.
So this is a pretty vengeful God, isn't it?
It certainly, well, whether vengeful or my power show off. And again, in the blue story, this is not a human thing. This is a divine thing.
Yeah.
This is the God of Moses against the God of Pharaoh. And that's why the blue story has Pharaoh's magicians doing it as well. And spoiler alert for the fall, when we get back to the lice, Pharaoh's magicians can't repeat this trick. They can't replicate this one.
Or you wouldn't want them to.
Well, I wouldn't want them to replicate the blood or the frogs either.
I know, but lice,
The whole
I
thing
mean,
is pretty bad.
working in a school, I ended up having lice, and it
Oh, yeah,
was
lice are wonderful.
oh, it was miserable.
Checking the hair for the nits,
Yes,
sending the kid home for Rid-X and a little fine-tooth comb.
it was
Yeah.
less fun before
And my
Rid-X came
hair was
invented.
like down to here, so
Yeah. And just imagine if you went out on the playground and wasn't a grass field, it was a lice field.
I wouldn't go out. I don't know. Dave
Now,
took
this is
a
where we leave
comb
the
and went through my
Egyptians.
hair.
We leave them either with piles of stinky dead frogs, or we leave them with all the dust of the land has turned into lice.
Have you
Again,
finished?
red story is Moses and Pharaoh. Blue story is God of Moses through Aaron against God of Pharaoh through the magicians. Some questions to keep in mind when studying Torah with passages like this is this a story of a vengeful God? Is this a story of a jealous God? Is this a story we don't like and the rabbis didn't like? And so the rabbis try to explain it away and we try to explain it away. Or is this a story by a biblical author to a biblical audience about something that was a formative experience for the people of Israel and shows the power of God without worrying about the morality, which is a later construct, not a construct of the time, because the surrounding cultures, including the gods of Pharaoh and Egypt, were never moral.
We haven't seen morality yet, have we?
That's what I'm saying. This was
But yet, I mean, from the beginning of our reading.
well, unless we talk about the whole process of what's going on, is God being moral in dealing with it this way? That is, if God has that much power, why didn't God just take him out?
Yeah.
So this becomes the issue of, is the Torah a God of judgment and harshness and immorality in our modern sense, or is this an amoral God because morality, as we view it, is not in fact a concept of the time when dealing with the gods?
And yet, the creation was found to be good, which is in fact, a comment on. It wasn't good and evil. There was.
Well, no, it wasn't good and bad. It was done and not done. Again, even the word good, do we read it in a literal way of doneness, or do we read it in a moral way of goodness? And the question is, what would the biblical author and audience have heard in the word good? So one
of the Christian arguments for women not being priests is they can't be in the image of God. And my feeling is, if you go back to Genesis early, all creation was found to be good and the same for practical purposes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, whether you take one or two, in Genesis 1, clearly male, female is the image of God.
Right.
Yes.
It are.
And the only ones who are not in the image of God are those who are not both male and female at the same time.
But is it because of women being the temptress women pulling Adam out of the Garden of Eden.
I think
Well,
they mean quite
that's
literally the image,
yeah,
you
that
know,
becomes again a later construct
much later.
with the first woman in Genesis 1 being Lilith.
Mm.
And that may have to do more with an early rabbinic and early church uh, patriarchy who's afraid of the goddess mother and the goddess world of the time.
Like the Salem witch trials.
Yes, somehow women have to be demonized because certainly men and their lust is never at fault.
No, never.
So wait, so we didn't, so the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were not in our readings?
They
Yeah,
were
we
not
read
in
that.
verse 1, they were in chapter 2 through 4. They're in the red story, not in the blue story. And
Well,
in the red story, as with this one, the red story actually is to explain why it is that we are in a situation where women have a lot of trouble in childbirth and people don't like snakes.
Yep.
It's not a causative, it's an explanatory. Also, from a one of the many Jewish views of Genesis 2 through 4, we left the Garden of Eden because that's the only way we could grow. In the Garden of Eden, we would stagnate.
We
yeah.
were children.
And for that, I would recommend the first edition of Star Trek many years ago when they land on the Eden planet and find that they'd better leave. Or you can look at the Greek mythology of the lotus eaters.
Mm.
So, yes, women are not inherently evil, but men and women are inherently good. But what we will get in a later red story is sin crouches at the door, waiting to pounce on you when you leave home. But yes, when in Genesis 1, the male female is the image of God. And in Genesis 2, the male female is the image of God. The difference is in Genesis 1, we're followed by Genesis 5, where the male female self splits into male and female separations. And Genesis 2 through 4, God splits the male female into male and female. But in neither case does it say the male remains the image of God and the female loses that.
The reading I read in church this morning was in Exodus, where God picks the Hebrew people to be his favorites. You will be my people. And it's caused a lot of trouble, that sentence.
Yes, it does. Because what does it mean to be chosen?
Exactly.
And, it's like in the army. Being a chosen
Yes,
volunteer is not necessarily a good
you
thing.
have been invited. Yeah.
So how are the different ways it's interpreted?
So one of the ways is a classical story about the giving of the Ten Commandments. When we are standing, according to the Hebrew, in later Exodus, it says we were standing tachat hahar, which translates literally as under the mountain.
Oh.
But the tachtanim, the underness, is also the foothills or at the base of. So tachat hahar would be at the foot of the mountain, not literally under the mountain. However, the Midrash, choosing to deal with the chosenness issue, says, God said, I need a representative people on the earth. I need an anchor, a human anchor to the earth. I am the God of everyone and everything because I created everyone and everything. But if I'm going to actually be a part of this world, I need an anchor to the world. By the way, that's often said about people who are excessively spiritual, is they need a corporeal anchor. And so some of the most famous spiritual people needed somebody to ground them because they spent too much time in the clouds.
Mm.
So God says, I need an anchor. And according to this story, God goes to the Canaanites and says, I got a bargain. I got a deal. I want you to be my people. I will be your God. I've got this list of 10 rules for you to follow. You follow them, and we've got this relationship going. And the Canaanites say, so, like, what's on these 10 rules? And God says, you shall not have intercourse with somebody else when you're married. No adultery. And the Canaanites say, forget about it. Saturday night wife swapping parties is our only form of entertainment, since we haven't had the Daily Show or any good entertainment invented yet. And so then God goes to the Philistines and he says to them, same thing, I've got a bargain for you. And they say, so, like, what's in this? And they say, you shall not kill. They say, what? Forget it. We're a marauding band. We thrive on killing our enemies and taking their land for our own. And so then God goes to the Moabites. And again, the same kind of thing. And they always have an objection to one of the commandments that they're offered. So finally, God goes to Moses and says, tell the people of Israel, I've got this bargain. And naturally, Moses and the people say, so what's in the bargain? And God says, I'll tell you what's in this bargain. You see this mountain I'm holding over your head? You take the bargain, I'll put the mountain back down. You don't take the mountain, I'll drop it on your head. And that's why it says we were standing tachat hahar, under the mountain. So we are coerced into being the chosen people.
So is that
boy.
a midrash? Is that a famous midrash?
That's a fairly famous midrash. There's a modern humor version of it, which is the punchline is not, I'll drop the mountain on your head, but God says, I've got this set of rules. And Moses says, how much? God says they're free. Moses says, I'll take 10.
Not a dozen, huh?
Then the rabbis made 318,
613.
Yeah.
613. Yeah, that's right.
365 plus 248. So yes, that's the issue of what is chosenness. And again, to read a biblical verse out of context is the antithesis of Judaism.
Mhm.
Unless you're reading it out of context because you're making a morality statement through Midrash. But once again, generally, Midrash tries to enhance the sense of godliness in the world, not this to enhance the sense of separation, division, and hatred in the world.
Yeah.
So for that, again, check the TBZ website through early in the summer for more information on our summer gathering. And then after the holidays, check the TBZ website for the new October through April series on the Torah roots of the Haggadah.
But could you say that again? You're not going to send the information to the group about the